friend of ours in planting a Stewart, and it's been about 10 years and it hasn't fruited either. So,
So we grafted ours over. But Idella, you like yours?
you want to talk about your experience?
My avocados have only been in the ground maybe 2.5, 3 years.
Uh-huh.
They bloomed heavily last year. Stuart did nothing. I got a few hops and didn't even know I was cutting it down to 7 feet. Next thing I knew, I had 10 of them lying in the ground. So I have to pay more attention. This last year, they both bloomed very heavily. The hops produced more. And the Stuart, maybe 2.
Uh-huh.
But it's only about this tall.
Right. Cindy Falkowski from Santa Clara town has had one for 10 years. It's really big, and she says she gets her 4 to 10 fruit on it a year.
Oh, well, clearly I have to buy 2
That's
more
what she
from
says.
you
I'm going to
folks.
chop it out.
So once you've planted a couple of Mexican varieties, just so you have avocados for sure, then you kind of can reach out and take some chances.
Right, it's your baseline and insurance against a cold winter. Because 21 degrees, you won't be eating a Gwen for 3 years, but you might be eating a Zatana.
Are these clear for everyone? They're kind of foggy up here.
Can we turn off one more set of lights, maybe?
Yeah, I think it says I'm so close to them. But I do want you to all admire the net problems that my Gwen has put on for next
We
year.
need the middle one off, not the sides.
We really love the Haas type avocados, and I have a lot of respect for the trees that have come out of UC Riverside's breeding program, and Gem is one of those. I should have brought one to show. They're beautiful. You can see they have that spotted characteristic.
It's like a golden spot over purple, and it purples up on the top half of the fruit when it's ripe with gold kind of yellowish spots. It's kind of, it's like the Milky Way or something. And that's the seedling, a seedling of Gwen, which is, derived from Haas. And Gwen was that was the avocado that UC Riverside thought would take over all the Haas plantations, but it ended up being unproductive. They sold it heavily to residential and horticulture, nurseries, landscapers and such, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But it turns out that in a backyard situation, it doesn't make fruit because it's really pollinator picky. It needs a diverse pollinizers that are not closely related to it. So if it's planted next to a Haas, the pollen from the Haas it's sterile with, and so it won't make fruit.
What's the good pollinizer for the house?
Bacon is good, Zatano's good. Anything not related to it.
I heard that they self-pollinate themselves, like I should go out and shake my avocado tree and it pollinates itself. I don't really know what variety.
I wouldn't bother shaking.
Yeah, I wouldn't bother shaking it. And a lot of varieties are not at all self-fertile. There are some varieties that are. Reeds are peculiar and they are somewhat self-fertile, but we'll cover that.
So these are 2 more from the UC Riverside breeding program, and we really like the lamb. And I think other people here put up their hands and said, I had lamb.
Back there from, where are you from with a lamb? Yeah. Where are you growing that? In Sonoma?
Napa.
Napa.
Yeah.
You getting fruit on it?
Yes.
Yeah. It tends to fruit real heavy and it's big, and it's kind of a small seed.
And just last weekend,
Delicious.
the Monterey Bay chapter did a tour of a property in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and he's doing a monoculture of lamb hops. And he had, a couple hundred?
Couple hundred
Lamb
with no
trees?
pollen back there.
And they were loaded with fruit. So some seem to work, but our thought is that you should always, if you can, plant a non-related avocado tree near your avocado tree. You'll increase its productivity. Speaking of productivity, there's a surprise, another of our favorites.
Right. Beautiful tree, vigorous grower. It's supposed to be delicious, but ours is 5 or 6 years old.
The surprise is if it actually bloomed.
It did bloom at least this year.
Yeah.
Are these Haas related also?
Haas related, yeah. Both of these are seedlings of Gwen. The Gem, the lamb, surprise.
With the Haas
relatives, do they have kind of the same frost tolerance or intolerance as the house?
They're pretty close.
Similar, yeah.
Doesn't the surprise have Mexican heritage?
It's got some, but so does, as does hops. So it's a seedling of Gwen, which is a granddaughter, or a daughter of hops, I guess. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone else has a different experience, but people we've talked to who've grown surprise are all waiting for it to fruit. And maybe it needs a different time. It's a bee flower, and bee flowers are finicky. They do something funny. They open their flower, their female flowers in the afternoon. And in our climate, we're a little colder than it's supposed to be for the avocados, so their clock's a little off. So Julie Frink was saying they tended to delay their opening until sometimes after dark, and there's no pollinators around, no bees or anything pollinating, so they don't do well.
Is it specifically bees that pollinate?
Well, there's flies, bees, native bees, and bees don't love them, they're not crazy about them, but they're the best pollinators.
But having said that, our Zatano is a bee, and every year it's loaded, so
Different bees are different,
Yeah.
there's some bee-type flowers bee-type trees that do work well. Bacon's a bee, Satana's a bee.
this is an example of the pollination, like the importance of pollination. Here's a Gwen tree right here, and that's we already talked about it, it's a Haas offspring, and we've had that tree. It's a very slow-growing tree. We've had it for, 12 years or so, and every year it makes so many flowers, and it sets, tens of thousands of fruit, and then they all drop off, and you're left with 6. And so we read about it, and we knew it was a pollination problem, so we planted a Helen right next to it, which is a vigorous bee
Yeah.
tree.
The green gold, with the queen on the other side, just surrounded
And a
by bee
Jan
flowers.
voice too. And it's loaded now. We've had 2 years of really heavy crops with the,
Yeah,
as soon
really,
as it started flowering, it started making fruit. And they're an excellent fruit. It's a nice tree for, kind of a smaller lot, although you do have to have that other tree nearby, because it doesn't grow fast, and it's delicious.
yeah, we were reading UC Riverside has a study that says basically if your pollinator tree is more than 25 feet away, it's as if there wasn't a pollinator tree. So the bees, I guess, when they fly to the trees, they fly to a small group. They don't travel widely throughout the orchard and spread pollen widely. They go back and forth. Reading.
Is this our favorite avocado?
Yeah,
It's one of them.
this is the one we recommend. This is really food for us, not than lamb hops or jam.
Why? Why do you like this one better?
Well, it's delicious for one thing, but it's made
And
more
big.
fruit for us and in younger age. It's fruited in the third year, I guess.
What size is the seed?
It's a pretty good size, but nobody complains. Look at the size of that fruit.
Yeah.
There's plenty of meat in there, and we can cut that open later so you can get a look at it.
What temperature will it go down to?
At our house last winter, we were down to 25.
With almost no damage.
On the bigger trees,
25 out in the orchard, or 25 on your lawn, or what?
no, we're on a hill, so it varies from place to place, and this tree got 25.
Just for like one day, or do you have?
It was like 2 or 3 days, and the lowest it got 26, 27, 26, 25, and it got minor tip burns. On the new, I guess it's new pushing growth, got singed, but old leaves didn't get burnt.
And it's a late bloomer, literally. Like
It's
it-
smart, yeah.
And so you can see, even though we got to 25, can you see the young cropland set? It probably didn't bloom until end of May,
Right.
and so it's well after the frost. Whereas some of our other ones will bloom earlier, like the Pinkerton is always blooming early, and luckily it blooms over a long period of time. But the first ones always get hit by the frost.
Yeah,
If the reed blooms late, what do you use to pollinate it with?
It pollinates itself.
Oh, that's right, sorry.
It's a miracle. And it's, you know, we like it because of the size, but it's also very high oil content, and it has a aspect to its flavor that I think a Haas doesn't have. It has a, like some people say, it's like a walnut flavor, or a nuttiness to it, that it's just a very nice.
Plus, it's slow to oxidize. It doesn't brown like the Haas will. It's,
You put your hand up.
Julie Frank says reed is an extremely columnar tree, but I've not viewed avocados extensively in Southern California. The only mature reeds I've seen have been at Gene Lester's property, kind of, I guess, inland from where you are,
Right.
right on the coast, and his were not really at all columnar. So what do you have to say about that?
well, Jane's trees are old, and a lot of them were pruned up by deer or something, or, you know, like his trees are kind of canopied and umbrella down. Ours are certainly columnar, and it's a weird growing tree. It tends to grow a shoot up, and then it'll bend over and hang down, and then it'll grow a shoot up from that and bend over and hang down. So it's really vertical
You can
growing,
kinda see it
and
right
then
here.
droopy.
See how that's drooping
Yeah,
down?
it's really droopy, and so easy to control and shape, because you can easily cut off these downward drooping branches and let vertical leaders go, and it doesn't seem to, you know, spread out much.
Reed is found in Commerce, isn't it?
Yeah, you can buy it right now, you can get it from Buy Right Market, or
Oh, you mean the tree or the fruit?
The fruit.
Yeah, both are, yeah.
How large would you let like a avocado tree get?
You can do anything you want. Avocados are really flexible that way. As long as you don't prune them in the summer when it's really hot, you don't want to let the sun's rays get on the trunk because they're really sensitive to sunburn. But if you go out there in the winter, you can make it look like a poodle if you want to.
My grandmother had a Duke, and she cut the top off all the time, constantly. And when we asked her why, she said, so I can see the Hollywood sign.
yeah, they don't care. Avocados are so tolerant.
We find that the real problem for us is that we can't cut the fruit off. So it's, like we in some ways are happy when there's like a bone or something, so we can go in and cut it off. You had a question?
How tall do reeds get if you just let them go?
Well, they're supposed to get like 30 feet tall or so.
But
We're
none of
keeping
our-
ours like 12 feet.
Reed or in general?
Oh, in general, they vary, but reed, that's what the question was.
I'm just wondering about pruning. For some reason in my mind, I thought that it was better to prune them in the spring or summer. But you said no, not the summer, the winter is
Okay, you
better.
gotta be careful in the
What
winter time
months?
because you wanna leave canopy on your tree. You don't wanna open your tree up because the canopy does hold heat in.
Careful in the summertime.
And be careful in the summertime. Ellen said you don't want the sun on the bark, but really it's the green bark you don't want the sun on, where that tender new growth. So if you have big shoots coming up, you don't want to expose big windows in those things. You just have to keep that in mind, that they're susceptible to sunburn. So prune in a way that doesn't leave big exposed green, sort of unseasoned, kind of newish wood.
But it's a really good point that you do like to have that canopy in the winter to hold the cold in. Like, we have a tree called a jamboyce, and it has a really, for us, it has a funny growth habit. It almost looks like a Dr. Seuss tree. It like sends out long branches and then has tufts of leaves at the end of each branch. And we didn't like it. We felt like it was unhealthy for the tree. And then lo and behold, this winter, we got down to 25, and that was probably the most seriously injured of all of our trees because it wasn't able to hold that heat in at all underneath. And so we've pruned it back now, and it's shooting up much lower, and it's making a thicker canopy.
Yeah, it actually seems to be like getting burnt back. Like crazy.
Yeah, we'll get to that. The love that avocados have of their self-destruction.
Pinkerton, maybe our second favorite.
We love the Pinkerton. Everyone should have a Pinkerton after they plant their plant. Free.
Do they turn dark when they ripen?
A little darker. We have one
Where is
somewhere.
that? I think it's no, they get duskier, but it seems like
Is reed a good pollinizer for others?
Yeah, this is a Pinkerton here. I'm sorry?
Is reed a good pollinizer?
Not great, just because it blooms kind of late. It catches the tail end of all the other, of a lot of the other blooms, but not all. This is really meaty, really small seed, small
yeah.
tree.
Sometimes you giggle when you cut the bow because the seed is so small. You're just so full of enjoyment.
There's a lot to love. It is delicious.
They can get kind of big too, huh? That looks like a small one. Like, have you seen
Yeah,
a
that
They're
one was
big,
small.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're
they can be
really
big.
big and really long.
That's a good one.
Good point. This is a very frustrating tree. It's called a Carmen, or it's sold as a Carmen Haas, so they can sell them as Haas's in the store. And it's an exciting tree because in our area it blooms twice a year. And we find that in the spring that our bees are not very interested in our avocado blooms because they're not as rich and alluring as like an apple tree or a peach or
Where everything else is.
yeah,
growing.
everything else is going. But then when it blooms in November, the bees are all over it. And we often will, it'll set 2 crops a year. And it will often will set the bigger crop in November. And which is really nice because then it ripens in June. Or
June of the next year, yeah.
no, the other next year.
Right.
And so, and that's often not very many good avocados around that early in the season.
But it's also a little frustrating because it sets this beautiful, last couple of years in a row, it's set really nice crops in November, and we've had 25 degrees, and that's singed the outside of the tree off, and that's where that new crop tends to hang. And so those exposed, basically the flower clusters have these little fruit initiates hanging from them, and then the freeze comes through, burns everything off, all those fruits, and the only thing that survives is the ones that happen to be tucked underneath the canopy. So we get tantalized kind of.
They're
But
really
you're saying
good though.
it matures 25 months after?
18.
18. Is our math wrong? No, okay, so it sets in November, and then it goes around to the next November, and then 6 months later it's ripe, so it's,
18.
Yeah.
Is there a chart that gives those times? I can't find it. It says
A ripen
A chart
chart?
that
fruit and how long it takes to ripen.
it depends.
I know it depends.
I
but
mean, it
is
even
there-
depends
is
in
there-
our area between my house
okay.
and Gene Lester's place that's up on the hill in south-facing slope on zone 16.
So may I put a plug in for Garden Diaries? And beyond your property, but the neighborhood watch. You're watching fruit. When does that tree flower? When does it fruit? When was the hard frost? We need to be collecting this microclimate data because from neighborhood to Oakland, okay, you got Oakland Hills, you got the flats, right? You got the places where there's a lot of heat, you got out in the open, near the woods. We have a lot of different climates. So the way we're going to generate this information is as these guys do. They pay attention, they write it down. And they've seen the pattern over years. So that's what we have to do. We have to start generating our own information. We're blessed to have their experience in La Selva Beach, which is a very unique place.
Right,
It's 100
we
miles
read about
south.
these things from Julie Frank, and she talks about picking your Haas in May and June, or and we're picking them in November and December.
No, not quite that. More like October, September, October.
Started. But it depends on what part of the tree. We've even got a section of our Haas that hangs over a fence, and it gets morning sun on that fence, and it seems like the boards heat up. And there's a narrow zone just above that fence that sets fruits really heavily and ripens way earlier than the rest of the tree.
And on the other side of that fence, we have Montmorency cherries planted. And those cherries will bloom first at the bottom because there's more chill kind of below the fence line. And then often it will die off at the top because there's too much heat on it and the buds don't go dormant enough.
In the winter.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, you talk about microclimates. So the Carmen is frustrating because of those things we just told you about the burn-up, but the really frustrating thing is that this type, even though it was introduced in 1911 for West India Gardens, which I don't know what that is, it's now a patented variety, and the only nursery that's allowed to sell it is Brokaw Nursery down in Ventura. And
So it's not available.
so it's
to the
not available,
backyard.
and it should be like high on anyone's list because it has that flexibility that most trees don't have.
Right. Great. It's almost like a year-round harvest avocado.
And so we're hoping to run into a patent lawyer who will say, "There's no way. That's been out since
Well, we
1911."
have a patent lawyer as a member,
Yeah, we should have
Paul
one.
Borchardt.
Where is he?
Talk about it.
I'll give you his email address.
Write this one down. Yeah,
25
this
years
is,
is the limit on patents, eh?
20.
Yeah, but it hasn't been patented for long.
well,
Supposedly,
it's,
like,
years
it's
ago, that's
trademarked, I
1990.
think, on Carmen, but it's supposed to be patented also.
yeah,
When was it patented? What year?
I don't know offhand, but fairly
Because 20 years ago it's
recently.
93. I mean, that's.
I know, but I think it's
Is it
more
that
recent
recent?
than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Supposedly more Carmens are being harvested in Mexico now than Haas's are. But they're all being sold as Haas or Haas.
And it's really good. It's delicious fruit.
Yeah.
It's good.
So now we're going to start moving away from talking about specific cultivars that you can buy. And there are a lot more. We forgot one really good one we don't have a picture of. And that is the Ardith. And John was with us when we tasted one just recently, and it's an excellent variety. It was bred by UC Riverside. It was released for a couple of years, and then it was sold. The propagation rights were sold to the country of Israel. So we're not supposed to be selling it. But it's kind of a legal gray area there because they did release it for a few years.
There was a window, yeah, where it was released for a couple of years. And so,
Rename it.
well, you can actually, it was out for 2 years, and so who knows where that drug went.
So maybe the Israeli, if you find Freddie and
Are you
I
recording this?
poisoned, the Israeli
How
government.
do you spell that?
Ardith. And it's an excellent avocado. It's big and creamy and
Small tree. And,
small pit, if I remember right.
precocious. It wants to make fruit real young and real small.
Yeah, and it does well at our house. Like, it's not in a great spot, and it seems like it can handle the cold pretty well. Like, they're all pretty close. All the all the Guatemalan types. There's not a lot of range of temperature of fruit frost resistance, but I would say that Ardith and Carmen can stand a little bit more frost than say like a Gwen or a Gem can. Would you agree with that? So this brings us to our search, our passion in life. It's the search for new avocado varieties that are cold, hardy, and really good. You want to talk about any of these?
Well, yeah, I mean, Bird Avenue comes from Jeffrey Wong from the Santa Clara chapter, and it's a big, I guess, seedling tree in Willow Glen, and it freezes pretty hard in Willow Glen, and this tree is always loaded. He brought us a box of the fruit. It's kind of an elongated Haas-type fruit with a tiny seed inside and really dense, extremely rich, oily flesh. And in our experience, I mean, through a couple of winters where it was 25, 2 years in a row, we had almost no damage.
On a very young tree.
Yeah.
And the younger the tree is, the greater the damage, so it's a good sign when the young ones don't get hit hard. And then this one here, the Bonnie Doon, is from, I don't know if you've heard of Bonnie Doon Vineyards here, but there's a wine tasting room with the Bonnie Doon winery on the west side of Santa Cruz, and there's a seedling avocado tree growing out of a sidewalk, and it gets no water, no care, nothing. There's everything that you would ever learn about planting a tree well is completely disregarded, and every year it's loaded with fruit. Even the years when no one has fruit, there's always fruit in that tree.
Right, we discovered it in the spring of 2007 after the killer freezes in January, 22 or something, and it was loaded with fruit. We filled a bag with fruit after that cold year, and no one had avocados.
Except for us.
So, is something pollinated, or do you think it's self-pollinated?
It seems like it must be self-pollinating, or at least pretty self-pollinating.
The fruit is a little bit on the small side. It's not tiny, but it's just not a huge fruit.
And the seed's a little bit on the big side, so.
Yeah, a little bit. But the flesh is really creamy, and this is the first year that our grafted tree has really flowered for us, and it is completely covered. And you can just see, like, I don't know if it's going to break limbs or not. not.
But an excellent flavor. I think we had it in our first avocado tasting where we had 60 varieties, and it was
What's that?
talked about.
60 varieties of avocados you tasted?
Yeah, that Julie Frink had sent up to us that we cut up for our chapter, and that was one of the favorites. I think that and Reed were considered the top two.
When are these tastings?
You never know.
2 weeks past
Whenever I
now.
like fall on the ground before Julie and get her to send it up. Then the Sonoma, we were up at the heirloom what do you call it?
Expo?
Expo.
Mm.
And Phil Peary was there, and he was talking about this great avocado tree. It was a seedling growing in the back of some Mexican restaurant in Santa Rosa. And we went out and got a cutting. And we
He
haven't
gave us the
proved
most
it yet.
circuitous directions.
Right? I don't know if he really wanted us to find it or not. We're just growing it out now. We don't know yet anything about it. It had like a Pinkerton-looking fruit on it.
Yeah, what's Santa Rosa like? Anyone growing an avocado in a Santa Rosa-like climate up here? Yeah.
The whole representation of all Santa Rosa.
Those are Santa Rosa
These
barrel.
are all from Santa Rosa.
Where'd you get that? Oh, Master Gardeners?
No, I harvested these.
Oh,
You bet.
you want to talk about
What
Titus?
do you know the tree that's behind the El Viejo Mexican restaurant near Mission and by the McDonald's?
Just hold those up for everybody to see. There's some images there. So there's, what, a dozen different
Can I pass
seedling
some
trees?
Pass this around?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Wow, that's exciting.
No,
Oh.
Santa Rosa is just a treasure trove. It's remarkable.
How cold did it get this time?
Very cold. There was a lot of tip damage.
Like, so 25 or
Yeah,
20
it
lower?
got to about 25.
It's a sunset zone 14.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, in some neighborhoods.
Yeah, in the cross pockets, hillsides are better. But the other thing is that the age of the trees, are there some relatively older trees, like more like 100-year-old type trees?
Exactly.
And some of those I know have informally been called like the Burbank variety or something because they were old. Not,
You
I
talk
don't
to
believe
some of
that.
these people, and of course Burbank planted theirs. And Burbank
Yes, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I would
There's
love
no
to talk
proof
to you
of
about
that.
what you found there.
But this is what we need to do, everyone. Go out, take pictures, write it on the calendar, and then we need to come back and try all these things out.
Okay,
This is a good, really good
Oh.
example of that.
There's actually one I've been trying to track it down. I've heard farther north in Santa Rosa, but I don't know if the fruit's like in Guerneville.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's cool. We'd love to.
I found one in Fort Bragg, California.
With fruit on it?
No, it was out of season.
On a hillside.
Well, if
Little
anyone finds
overstory
anything
covered.
that's of good quality, high quality, and is fruiting where it's cold, we would love to hear about it.
Yeah, so this is a weird one here. A friend of mine said that he knew somebody who came from Guatemala who brought an avocado up and planted it in Corralitas, and it was making fruit. And so he told me the street, and I was going to go and, with him and talk to that lady. But I happened to be driving on that street, and I saw this big avocado, and I said, wow, I wonder if that's the avocado tree that Kenny was talking about. So I stopped my car, and I went, and I noticed it was covered with big Mexicola type fruit, purple, long neck, but big. They were half-pound fruits, and it was very striking. Had a very beautiful, like a scarlet stem, long scarlet stem, long fruits. And I stopped and I knocked on the door, and the lady answered the door, and I said, no, it wasn't my friend's tree at all. It was some random lady, and I introduced myself, and I said I'd love to, get a snip of that tree and take a couple of fruits. And she said, sure, help yourself. So I climbed the tree, and there were just massive, beautiful fruits. They're very thin-skinned, strong anise flavor. We brought them back, ripened them up, and they were delicious. With minimal presence of strings, but not stringy.
Only stringy when they're overripe.
Yeah, that's really good. So we propagated it. Actually, our grafts failed. I think I had to go back and get signed with again. And she said, "Oh, the tree's sick. What do you think's wrong with it?" I said, "Oh, I'm not sure. You scraped all the mulch away. Maybe that hurt it. Maybe you should put mulch back on it." Anyway, I got signed with it. I propagated again. I went, and she called me about a month later. And she said, I cut the tree down because it was really getting sick. It was covered with fruit, right? But it was looking droopy, and it was this big around. Oh my gosh! cut the tree down, and then I had him grind the stump. So it's like, oh, okay, we've got these little graphs, 3 trees growing, that were the last representative.
Okay, is
Amazing
this a
variety.
lesson, everyone? Yeah. Is this a lesson?
Just
Ask permission, be observant, ask permission, and make it happen because the bulldozer's waiting around the corner and you don't even know about it.
Yeah.
Please.
Sure. Okay, I was in downtown waiting for my
Wow.
daughter to get out of a class, and she was in the municipal library in downtown Santa Cruz, and I had to go deliver fruit at a restaurant.
Wow.
Yeah. So I walked through this alley to deliver fruit, and I noticed there's a big old avocado tree behind the Santa Cruz Sentinel building in downtown Santa Cruz, and it's about 40, 50 feet tall and 50 feet across. It's gigantic, and I walked past, and I looked up, and there were big avocados hanging in that. So I went back to my car, I got one of these little shopping bags, and I climbed up in that tree, and it was weird up in that tree, because it was just like being inside of a giant dirigible. It was this framework, but nothing on the inside. It was only this like 3-foot layer of leaf on the outside with the fruit hanging way out there. And so I managed to get hold of a few of them. I got 10, and they were just
Look at
massive.
those. Huge.
Almost a pound. These aren't the biggest ones that you held up.
We had the first ones yesterday.
Yeah, I picked it on the 27th. They were, and we ate the first ones yesterday. So it took 16 days to ripen, which is a long time.
See the lenticels or the pores have become dark. That's a sure sign that you've developed full oils in the maturity of an avocado.
Yeah. So, who knows what this tree
Look at the
is?
size of that pit. What?
I
That's
know,
like
crazy, huh?
There's 2 types of avocados in the tree. There was a big, gigantic one that weighed about a pound, and those had a good-sized pit that was round. And then there were these long ones that were shaped more like a Pinkerton, and they were over a half pound in something. But they had this tiny kind of vestigial seed that looked like it wasn't completely formed, like they weren't properly pollinated, but set anyway.
And do they grow true to seed, or do you have to graft?
Do avocados grow true to seed?
Yeah,
No. Yeah, very much not so.
very much not.
Yeah.
And but the full disclosure is that they weren't as good as like a Haas or something like that. But I say they're better than a bacon.
I'd say they're better than a bacon, yeah, not as good as a Haas, but creamy and rich tasting. And is there a question about
In terms of the drought tolerance, like you're talking about Bonnie Doon,
Yeah.
when you graft it, are any of those characteristics on the grafted tree, you know, like with the rootstock, or is it only when it's...
Good
Oh.
question.
original seedling.
Yeah, as far as drought tolerance. you wanna say.
It's not gonna be the same, it's gonna be whatever you use as your rootstock.
Okay.
And you can choose different rootstocks to confer more salt tolerance or drought tolerance or heavy soil tolerance.
Yeah, what we found is avocado is about the least drought tolerant plant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then would it be true, though, if you used the seed from that Bonnie Doon to grow your rootstock, that it might have that drought tolerance?
Maybe, except your seed is gonna be different from the mother plant, probably.
Right.
So, hard to say, but that's a good thought. You might try that.
I'd be able to select.
Yeah, if you had a lot of space, you could do 10,000